All right, Matthias, shall we? Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning for those of you who have tuned in from overseas. My name is Carsten, and I'm the Executive Director of the European Leadership Network in Germany. It's my pleasure to open today's very first ever German-Israeli Space Forum that ELNET jointly hosts together with the Federation of German Industries, the BDI, and together with me, I have my dear friend and BDI colleague, Matthias Wachter. Hello, Matthias. It's the two of us who will guide you through today's program. We are very much looking forward to two amazing keynotes from Germany and Israel, followed by two panel discussions on the state as a solid rocket booster and from Earth to the moon. So stay tuned with us, and please don't hesitate if you have any questions and you'd like to contribute remarks. You have the Q&A function. You can raise your hand with the feature here on Zoom, and the whole session today is on the record. So be sure we will have some footage on social media around the whole event, and also some reports afterwards for those of you who might not be able to follow up the whole session with two keynotes and two panel discussions afterwards. So again, the European Leadership Network is building bridges between Germany, Europe, and Israel already since 2007, and we focus on politics and innovation. And today, when we speak about a new space race, we also speak about German-Israeli cooperation, as the European Union is still debating if they should include, hopefully they will, Israel in the space section of the Horizon Europe research program. We are building bridges. The BDI and ELNET together are proud to host this first ever new space forum for German-Israeli cooperation. So without further ado, Matthias, why don't you take the floor here?
Thank you very much, Carsten. My name is Matthias Wachter. I'm the head of international cooperation and space at the Federation of German Industries, BDI, and also on behalf of BDI, a warm welcome to everybody. We as BDI are very excited to have this first joint space event with our Israeli friends and partner, and would like to welcome all our great guests today. We especially appreciate that Thomas Jarzombek, the federal government coordinator for German aerospace policy, and Professor Isaac Ben Israel, the chairman of the Israeli Space Agency and of Israel National Council for R&D and head of Interdisciplinary Cyber Research Center, are our keynote speakers today. It is our pleasure having you with us. We would like to thank all our speakers very much for taking the time today, and we are looking forward to exciting and insightful discussions with you and, of course, our many guests from Germany and Israel. Last but not least, we would also like to thank our partner ELNET for having this great event today with us. Israel and Germany are friends and partners. From our view, space is one huge opportunity for a closer German-Israeli cooperation. Space is of utmost importance for the entire German industry. If we think about Internet of Things, autonomous driving, and global connectivity, space is the basis. But space is much more. It's about innovation, new technologies, tackling climate change. Space fascinates and excites. It connects people and ideas. Israel and Germany should be much more ambitious, we believe. We should aim for joint and concrete projects. Why aren't we showing the world what we are capable of together? Why aren't we letting our young people and engineers work together, develop ideas together, and thus grow stronger together? Let's make today's forum the starting point for even closer and concrete cooperation between our two nations, companies and people. We are really looking forward to it. Carsten, back to you.
Thank you very much, Matthias. We thought about labeling today's event with the slogan, "Where no man has gone before." But I think there were people who actually used that slogan before, and it's not 100% true. Germany and Israel are already space nations. And there are two people here on our virtual stage who couldn't say and describe the space race better than our two keynote speakers. So it's now my pleasure to introduce, first of all, Thomas Jarzombek. Some call him Mr. Space in the German politics. Thomas Jarzombek is a member of the German Bundestag, the national parliament of the Federal Republic of Germany, since 2009. And since 2018, he is the federal government coordinator for German aerospace policies. Besides that, he also has the function of taking care of digital policies and digital innovations. So, Thomas Jarzombek, without further ado, the floor is yours. We will have your keynote first, followed then by Professor Ben Israel. So, please.
So, dear Carsten, dear Matthias Wachter, and dear Professor Ben Israel, ladies and gentlemen, it's really a huge pleasure for me to speak here today. And when it comes to cooperation between Germany and Israel, we have a long, successful legacy here, especially when it comes to tech topics. And you know for certain that Germans look very open-minded to Israel as the tech nation. And we are excited about all the things that you're doing there in the startup ecosystem. And some of these things we try to take over to our country. And so with the German-Israel Accelerator, for instance, we have quite a legacy in cooperation here. And so a big thank you in the beginning also to Carsten Ovens and ELNET for the JINSAM project, which is the next level of cooperation between the Israel startups and the German SMEs. And I believe this will be a very fruitful and huge cooperation. And I'm proud being part of this in some way. So when it comes to space, I think Israel really went where nobody's ever been before. And when we look back 2 years ago, a lot of people in Germany were fascinated about the Bereshit mission. And I was it for myself. And we all were upset when we have seen that you didn't really make it to the moon, but almost you made it. And as far as I know, it's the first time that aliens were deployed on outer space. It's not outer space, it's the moon, but nevertheless, where aliens have been deployed outside the Earth. And these are these small, tiny Putzig, we would say in German, Bärtierchen, tardigrades, or water bears called in English. And these very tiny animals, they can survive under unbelievable conditions for years and maybe 100 years until one drop of water will bring them back to life. And now you made them to live on the moon. And I think this is really pioneer spirit. And what we very much respect and where we look with huge interest to Israel is this hands-on mentality, that you're doing things without talking about all the risks all the day. This is something we sometimes do too much in Germany. And this is really something we can learn from Israel. And therefore, it's good to start here also cooperating in new space and in space in common. And we also have some cooperations between the German DLR, our German Aerospace Center. We have this very interesting STEMRED cooperation, because one of the highlights of the German space policy, or the space industry, more to say, is for sure that we are delivering half of the spaceship Orion, with which NASA will go to the moon. And therefore, the first flight will not be with real men on board. It will be with some bodies that are equipped here in this mission to measure what comes for them and how they can survive this trip. And so there's a very fruitful cooperation. And in the end, I think very important, is not only to look at the legacy, but also at the future and to open up the markets for new players and for new challenges. So we're going to create a new rocket industry in Germany, which is completely new, consisting out of 3 startups. And we support this with our New Future Fund. And so this is the promotion block for our policy, because we are starting to invest 30 billion euros in startups, and consisting out of 10 billion euros government money, 20 billion euros private money. And I think this will bring our startup ecosystem to the next level. And we have good cooperations here also with Israeli VCs and with Israeli startups. And I think this is a good basis also for what we are going to do out there when it comes to space policy. And so I'm very interested in this conference today. It's a great kickoff. And so thanks again for this initiative, and all the best to you.
Thank you very much, Thomas Jarzombek. That was the Federal Government Coordinator for German Aerospace Policy and the Commissioner for Digital Industry and Startups. So our next keynote speaker is already in the industry for quite a while. Professor Ben Israel is the chairman of the Israeli Space Agency and the chairman of the Israel National Council for R&D, as well as the head of the Interdisciplinary Cyber Research Center at the Tel Aviv University. He used to be a member of the Knesset, the Israeli National Parliament, and already in 2011, he was appointed by the Prime Minister to lead the task force that formulated Israel's national cyber policy. And as an expert in innovation and cyber, he is the best fit and the natural fit to actually lead today's mission to the moon, you could say, for Israel, to lead the space race for the startup nation. Professor Ben Israel, it's our pleasure having you with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm not in Israel now, and it's connected to our subject. I'm now in the UAE, and the reason I'm in the UAE is because we look for partners in trying again to launch on the moon. I mean, you know that our Bereshit was mentioned by Thomas. We had what we call a hard landing. We don't say we crashed on the moon. But I would like to start from this example, because what is important to know in this initiative of landing on the moon, that it was not a government initiative. It was not done by the space agency or the government of Israel. It was done by a group of private entrepreneurs, which came with the idea, raised the money. Everything is private here. And if in the last seconds, someone in the control room wouldn't push the wrong button, it would land now on the moon. But this was the case. You know, we all know technology sometimes depends on human beings. And I'm here because we look now for partners to launch the second one. We already raised the money, but we see space as an opportunity for international cooperation, especially in the Middle East, in which, you know, we are surrounded by Arab countries, and UAE just signed a contract with us, and it may serve as a tool for making the relationship between the states better. Coming back to technology, Thomas mentioned that Germany will like to renew its rocket capability. We were, as I guess you know, we were, I think, number 6 in the world, which launched a satellite, which everything, I mean, was done here in Israel, including the launcher, the rocket. We were number 6 in the world, at least, after, of course, the Soviet Union, the US, etc., the big ones. We are still, I think, the smallest one that did it. And we put an emphasis on, because we are small and because we have problems, we have to launch into the Mediterranean Sea, which means against the rotation of Earth. So we have to solve it by doing our satellites lighter, not smaller, but lighter. And therefore, we are very enthusiastic about the new trend what is called new space, in which everything becomes smaller, lighter, and by this, much better opportunities for business sector, private industry, not only the government, starting playing in this space game, I would say. There is a lot to be done between the two states. I mean, I'm speaking now about Germany and Israel. We have wonderful relations as a government space agency with DLR and of course European Space Agency. But our main goal, and I think yours is too, is to deliver as much as possible to the business sector, especially in the lower levels of industry, what we call startups. And we have a very much developed startup culture here. I think that by combining this with the advantages that you have on your side, being more systematic and much bigger than us, we can do a lot together. Thank you very much, and I hope that it's only the first step towards a long series of steps that will strengthen the relationship between the two states. Thank you.
Toda rabba. Thank you very much, Professor Ben Israel. That's exactly what this Space Forum is about, connecting Germany and Israel. And obviously, I mean, you're making fast progress with connecting Israel and the United Arab Emirates. One of the outcomes, obviously, of the Abraham Accords. So it's now the call on Germany not to lose a grip and to stay in touch. And if we, and together with the program Thomas Jarzombek mentioned earlier, with the GINSUM, the German-Israeli Network of Startups and Mittelstand, and the BDI can do and contribute to this whole, I think that's already an amazing success. So to give you some more insights about what Germany has to offer, in particular for Professor Ben Israel and our other participants from Israel, there is something the BDI has prepared for you. And so, Matthias, I hand it back to you now.
Thank you very much, Carsten. I think these two keynotes have shown very well how much innovative power and relevance lies within the new space ecosystem with its young and established companies, reaching out much further than just to space-related sectors. Space and satellite-based business models are increasingly important for our societies and the whole industry. Our next speakers have put much effort into gathering and evaluating all available data on the recent development of the German new space scene. We are happy that they are now with us to present for the first time their new space industry report 2020 for Germany, with exciting facts and figures on German new space startups. As BDI, we were very happy to support the report. Maria Janke and Nina Stary, co-founders of the young and innovative Berlin research company Capitol Momentum, a warm welcome to you. We are very curious on your insights on the German new space ecosystem. The stage is yours.
Yes, hello and good afternoon. Thank you for having us and for the opportunity to speak to you about the results of the first German new space industry study. I'm Maria Janke, the co-founder of Capitol Momentum. Nina, you are on mute.
Sorry. Okay, I'm Nina Stary and I'm the other co-founder of Capitol Momentum.
Okay, I will share the presentation. A minute, please. I hope everybody can see it. Okay. Yes, Capitol Momentum is an early stage research and market intelligence data analysis startup. And Nina and I have started mapping the German new space industry in October 2020. And with the support of BDI, and today we'd like to share some of the surprising results of our market analysis. We start with a segmentation of the new space ecosystem. First of all, I'd like to tell you that we have analyzed 92 German new space companies financially. And in 2020, the value chain analysis of the German new space ecosystem suggests that most companies' main business activities can be attributed to the upstream market, such as the micro launcher High Impulse. And 38% of the businesses focus their main operations on the downstream sector, for example, Mineric. Along the value chain, the German upstream sector accounted for 50% of the companies in our scope. And the dominant field of business models, that is 34, revolve around building activities, such as the development and manufacturing of new space hardware and or provisions of related software and engineering services. Most prevailing business activities in the downstream domain operate in the analyze segment, which includes value-adding services related to space data exploitation, such as AI and big data analytics, and so on. We have also analyzed the job creation and age structure in the German new space industry, and our analysis revealed that roughly 3,000 employees currently work in the German new space industry, most of which are employed in the upstream launch segment and for downstream the product domain. This chart on the left side shows the average employee number per company as of November 2020. 1/3 of our in-scope companies are less than 5 years old, which you can see in the donut chart. The German new space ecosystem is a young and very fast-growing industry. However, the majority of businesses, meaning 55%, are 10 or less years old, and almost 1/3 of the startups were founded within the last 5 years. This slide provides an analysis of the investor types and exits, and our analysis revealed 54 funding rounds over the course of the last 20 years, and surprisingly, VC investment only makes up 9% of the 20 years that we have looked at. And regarding exit types, which you can see on the right side, we saw that the main form of exits was acquisitions with 6 events and mergers with 5 events. That means that M&A is the most dominant exit form during the past 15 years. There was only 1 IPO exit.
In our study, we have also analyzed revenue generation and distribution of the new space industry in Germany. And we have figured out that 70% of our 92 in-scope companies already have generated revenue from operational activities, which provides them with strong fundamentals. For 2018, we estimate the industry revenue of approximately 900 million euro, which is a rather conservative estimation. Of these 900 million euro in revenue, about 600 million were generated solely by the upstream domain. To put this number into perspective, the German new space industry revenue makes up already 30% of the entire German space economy in 2018, and it is already 10% of the entire EU space revenue for 2018. Our calculated industry return on equity for shareholders was 19% on average for the whole industry. And we figured out that 76% of our in-scope companies in 2020 have B2B customers in the non-space industries, such as the railway industry, oil and gas, energy, agriculture, and so on. One example is the downstream data analytics company Supervision Earth, which provides infrastructure monitoring for pipelines to leading industry companies like GasNet, or Xavio, a downstream product company that provides digital farming solutions to BASF. Another interesting company is Yuri, an upstream company that provides access to the ISS and provides services related to microgravity research to companies like GlaxoSmithKline or Charité Berlin. Our research also suggests that the demand growth factor for downstream products, which is 136%, already outpaces the demand for upstream products in 2018. So this gives reason to believe that the downstream market already has begun to grow rapidly as well. Next slide, please. Another topic that we would like to present to you is about top investment yields in the German new space industry. So venture capital deal investment in German new space businesses more than doubled from 2019 to 2020. As you can see on the left chart, in 2020, venture capital companies invested about 308 million euro in 7 German companies, compared with 169 million euro in 2019. We believe this is incredible momentum and expresses increased investor interest in the German new space industry. As you can see on those 3 donut charts to the right, most funds in 2020 went into the upstream sector. But interestingly, the first quarter of 2021 shows that 80% of all VC investments went into German downstream companies. And this further supports our thesis of an increasingly growing downstream market and another record year with hopefully spectacular funding rounds in the German new space industry. So there it is. That is our first new space industry report 2020 for the German market. It is completely in English and contains 40 pages on topics like the German ecosystem characteristics in general, financial fundamentals, the revenue generation and distribution, demand signals, or return on investments. We also dedicated a whole chapter to non-space industry use cases. And lastly, we have a business review that introduces new space newcomers, news headlines, partnerships, top investment deals, and launches. So what's next? If you are now curious to learn more about research products from us or our new space company and investor databases, or if you became maybe inspired to collaborate with us in research projects, please visit our website at capitalmomentum.com or send us an email.
Yes, and if you're interested to invest in our growth, don't be shy and contact us through future@capitalmomentum.com. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Maria and Nina, for providing us with these insights. Thank you very much. And we have a few minutes left. So I'm wondering, are there any questions for Maria and Nina concerning the first German new space industry report? So I'm looking into the chat. Are there any questions, or did both of them already answer all your potential questions?
Matthias, maybe while our audience is still looking for the right question, a question from my side: where can we find this report? Is it available for download on your website, or can we support here?
Yes, you can download our reports under this in our shop under this webpage.
Amazing, thank you very much. I already saw some reports about it in German media, so it's obviously widely covered already. So congratulations to your work, and I'll have a look at the website later on.
Thank you.
Okay, so if there are no questions from the audience, then may I ask you a question? You've covered the dynamic growth and what's going on in the last couple of years. So I'm wondering, where do you see the German new space ecosystem, let's say, in 5 years?
So we have seen, we started to cover the first year, 2020. So though we looked a little bit into the past, we cannot We don't see so many trends now, but what we saw is that investment grew a lot. They doubled. We saw also that the revenue increased from 2017 to 2018. And there is a lot of indication that this is a very strongly growing industry. And we are also tracking all the newcomers, and we have a long watch list also for companies to add. So there is a lot of movement and new business startups that we see. So in 5 years, we see a lot of potential for the downstream sector, for data analytics and Earth observation products. And we hope to see even more cooperation between the new space industry and the traditional non-space industries.
Okay, exciting. So there are now a couple of questions in the chat. I think to don't lose any time, we should, let's say, combine them, and you answer them en bloc. So the first question is how Corona will affect the new space economy in Germany. Question number 1. Question number 2, did the report only focus on Germany? And question number 3, revenues. Is it only commercial, or does it also include government contracts?
Okay, so how does Corona affect the industry? For 2020, we have not seen any big effects from Corona, especially towards the downstream sector. I think this was unaffected, or I mean, people went to remote working. A field that was probably affected is maybe more the upstream side of the market. When we think about the delays with Ariane 6 and all of those companies that relate on this production. So I feel like that they had probably some trouble, but in general, we haven't seen any out of businesses that were especially high now, but maybe we need to wait another year to see the effects coming in.
Okay.
And yeah, so the report is only in English. Was that the question, or
no, it's
Germany?
Does it only cover German companies?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, it does. Only Germany.
Okay, and the revenues you looked at, commercial or commercial only, or do they also include government contracts?
We cannot distinguish this yet with our data. We see only revenue figures from the P&L, profit and loss statement. Okay. And we couldn't see any details. We have looked at public funding and grants, but this is, we can say it's solely from basically commercial or operational activity, but we cannot say whether these are contracts with the government or something like this.
Okay, then there's a question by Professor Klaus Schilling from the University of Würzburg. He asks, do you know how many small sats from the German new space ecosystem are already in orbit? Do you know that?
Yeah, we have a chapter for that in the launch segment. I'm having the report open so I can scroll through it. So we had already a few companies such as German Orbital Systems. I would say maybe like around five companies that have already launched satellites in orbit. Yeah, so this is what we can say.
Okay, and then I'm taking a last question. Maybe Thomas Jarzombek should now listen very carefully. Do you see any obstacles set by the government that restrict the growth in the new space sector?
Well, this is probably aimed towards the contracts from ESA and the whole letter to Breton. Probably, I'm thinking about this. Yeah, we support fully the position of the new space companies there. There should be even smaller little contracts or contract awards to German companies, even if they might not qualify for it. That would definitely foster the ecosystem. I mean, it has worked in the US as well with NASA contracts, so why wouldn't that work over here in Europe?
Okay. Maybe Thomas Jarzombek want to add briefly one sentence to that?
We already started this kind of strategy when I in the beginning said that we are starting a launches sector in Germany. It's been exactly the way that NASA is doing, that we started to buy services from startups. And especially here, we said we are going to buy two rocket starts from launcher startups. And the first winner for this competition was ESA Aerospace. And now we're making this deal, or ESA is doing this deal, and we are sending a support letter to them. And so next round will be next year, and there are two furthermore startups, and one of them will also raise this deal for two starts in a worth around 11 million euros.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Maria and Nina, for providing us with these insights. Very interesting. Good job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Carsten, I would say we jump right away into the first panel, if that's okay.
The floor remains yours.
Okay, so I have the honor now to moderate the first panel, the state as a solid rocket booster, fostering innovation. And we have roughly, let's say, 35 minutes. And I'm really looking forward to moderating this exciting panel, and would like to welcome briefly our panelists. Marco Fuchs, CEO of OHB and Vice President Space of the German Aerospace Industries Association. I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Anne Christmann, spokesperson for innovation and technology policy of the Alliance 90 and the Greens parliamentary group at the German Bundestag. Mrs. Christmann, thank you for discussing with us today. I would like to welcome Avi Blasberger, Director of the Israel Space Agency at the Ministry of Science and Technology. Mr. Blasberger, we highly appreciate having you here on the panel. And finally, I'm happy to welcome Mr. Moti, I hope I pronounced the name now correctly, Eliashiv, co-founder and director of New Rocket, a promising Israeli startup that is developing a new generation of sustainable rockets. So Moti, welcome, and thank you so much for being our guests. Let me ask the first question to Anna Christmann. Frau Christmann, do you believe that space and new space is part of the solution for climate change and more sustainability on Earth?
Of course it is. And I think that is one major reason why we should really get more focus on new space, not only in Germany, but also in Europe and in cooperations that we are talking about today. I think we as a Green Party, we really realized over the last years that there are big chances in new space to really get more data on ecological questions and to have more projects, and that can be used for better forestry, for better farming strategies that are more ecological. So I think, yes, there are many chances, and that is why we would like to support this technology in the next years. And that is something we plan as a Green Party to bring in also in a possible new government. Okay, great. Thank you.
Moti Eliashiv, what is your motivation for founding a New Rocket?
Hey,
I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sorry.
Yes, you're perfectly okay. The name is Moti Eliashiv, so it's fine. So my motivation for starting is just starting a new thing. You know, the creation of a new company that can do a major impact, especially in a field which I liked as a child space. What I can tell you is that there's also a special relation to Germany. What we are doing in New Rocket, we are developing rocket engine, which are based on green fuel. The fuel is in a gel form. It's a gel fuel. And actually, I found about gel rockets by getting to know that German companies were working with gel fuel technology. At the time, both myself, I'm an aerospace engineer, as well as my partner, we knew that there are two types of rocket engines fuel. One is solid fuel and the other is liquid fuel, but we didn't know anything about gel. So we went out and they Googled about it, and the first name that came up is actually an Israeli scientist, Professor Benny Natan from the Technion, which later on became our partner when starting the company. We learned about this technology, formed together a business plan, and we were able to get the seed funding later on from Incubate Ventures and the IIA, the Israel Innovation Authority, and starting the company as it is today.
Okay, so very exciting, and we wish you all the best. Sounds very, very interesting. Mr. Fuchs, you are the CEO of OHB, and you are also the Vice President Space of the BDLI. So you are, so to say, the German Mr. Space on the business side. Coming to your activities at OHB, what motivates you to increase new space activities like setting up rocket factory or the initiative for German offshore spaceport?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Wachter. Well, of course, we heard also from Thomas Jarzombek that the world of launchers is changing. Germany is very active with micro launcher developments going on. And we are very happy to be part of that development. So our involvement in Rocket Factory aims at developing a very effective, very efficient, commercially successful micro launcher that hopefully will be launched also in a couple of years, also out of the North Sea platform. We know that the whole launch process needs to be efficient. So logistic is important, and yes, the North Sea would be a very good location to launch into trajectories that go polar and sun synchronous. So it's exciting to be part of this development. And yes, OHB is now an established space company. But when I look at Avi Blasberger, who's a very old friend of mine, it reminds me a lot that about 20-25 years ago, Avi was our first significant export customer when he was in charge at ELOP, now Elbit. And we built for him the electronics for a Korean Earth observation satellite. And so that just shows that we as OHB started small 20-25 years ago. But it was the same spirit at that time. And we want to be part of this new wave again. And I'm very happy to meet you again, Avi, on this location here, not being able to come to the Ramon conference this year, but hopefully soon again back in Tel Aviv then.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Fuchs. Avi Blasberger, you are the director of the Israeli Space Agency. What do you think? What role should space agencies play in this new world of new space?
Okay, first I would like to mention you've talked in the keynote about elaborating the relation between Germany and Israel in the space area. So I have to mention that my previous meeting was with the chair of the DLR. So we are working on that. And Marco just mentioned that I'm personally working with German industry more than 25 years. So we need to continue to elaborate that and to strengthen that, but it is already exists. Now for your question, I think that the space is an area that still requires some government intervention. Mm-hmm. Even in the US, we all look at SpaceX and the tremendous effort to be the biggest private company and the launcher company. However, if you look, the first contracts came from NASA, which means it's not, maybe it's not a direct support, but it was an indirect support. We think that since space is sometimes a long-term industry on one hand, and on the other hand is a risky industry, even though it's all the way is a growing industry, still it needs some support of the government. And we can see that along the time, more and more investors are coming into the space market. And I believe that along the road, the intervention of the government will be lower and lower. But still, currently, we still need some support of the government in the startup companies, in new companies, in building infrastructure for at least for space upstream, since this is still an expensive venture for a small company. This is the role that government can take in growing the ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. You mentioned that there's already a very good exchange and cooperation between Germany and Israel in space. So if you had if you could wish for something, what would it be?
Between Israel and Germany?
Yeah, for more cooperation. Or is it already perfect?
So as I say, in one hand, I wish to have more cooperation between the Israeli Space Agency and the German Space Agency. This is on a governmental level, and we are working on that. And of course, I would encourage, and we are encouraging a lot, a cooperation industry to industry. I believe that the German industry is a very strong one, and the Israeli is strong as well and innovative, very innovative. Mm-hmm. And I think that both countries, if they would work together, that can make it more successful.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Frau Christmann, Arvid just said there will be an important role for the government and space agencies in space for the next future, and it will still be important. What do you think? How can public institutions support a flourishing new space system and foster innovative companies? What are your ideas?
Yeah, I think that's an important point. And for new space, it's true what is true for other technologies too. We need really flexible funding structures that are from the public, from the state initiatives. And we are too complicated and too traditional in Germany in many cases. For example, for spin-offs from academia, it's often very complicated to start a new company. Sometimes there are very high license fees or something like that to start a new company. So that must be easier. And also new agencies that we try, like the new Agentur für Sprunginnovation, the Agency for Disruptive Innovation, which can play a huge role also in areas like new space, I think. But it's very limited in its funding possibilities, because you have to fund an 100% public company when you want to get funding from this new agency. And I think all these things need to be much more flexible, and there we can learn a lot, I think, from the Israel ecosystem, where it's much easier to get venture capital, and it's much easier to found new companies. And there we could try to do something also with a focus on the area of new space, because I think it's very important that we have this startup ecosystem in this area. And I know Thomas Jarzombek is very ambitious and tries to do some steps in this direction. But I think in total, we need a much bigger step. And there was too little progress in the last 4 years.
So maybe you both of you can work together next time and make that happen. Okay, we got that point, Christman. Moti, as a young entrepreneur in space, what would you say? What are the main challenges for a space startup?
Okay. First of all, there are the obvious challenges that all startups face, not only in space. It's identifying the right market niche, developing the product, acquiring customers, etc., etc. There are two challenges which are relatively unique to space startups. One of them is financing. Financing, again, it's a challenge for every startup. Mm-hmm. But when you're talking about space, and we're developing rocket engines, so we say that the rocket engine runs not only on fuel, but it runs also on money. You need a lot of money to have the development and to run the operation. And again, it's a challenge to all startups, but it's highly difficult in space due to the time to market, barriers, especially in access to space. And here, the place of the agencies and the government funding is very, very important. Agencies like ESA in Europe, or the Israeli Space Agencies in Israel, which are very supportive, or the Israeli Innovation Authority also in Israel. I believe we will touch the financing issue also in later panels. And the other thing is the actual access to spaces, to put your stuff in space. So the barrier here is also very high. It is very expensive to launch. Mm-hmm. It is highly costly to get to the maturity level to put something in space, hardware or even software in space. I mean, you cannot just launch and try and see what happens. You need to be very firm with the development. And it's also one time shot. You have one shot to try it. So this barrier is very, very high, the access to space. And I think that in this case, in the access to space, the direct government support for allowing it, especially for small companies, can be very supportive, like buying a launch capacity which is dedicated to new technologies or startups to try their goods in space for the first time. Even to some extent, it can be more important than direct funding of companies, because strategically it will move the company to be focused on getting the stuff in space. And in this case, opportunities like the Bereshit moon lander that you mentioned earlier can be very appealing for trying new technologies. I mean, it's a non-for-profit mission with a lot of exposure to the public. So trying new technologies on this kind of a test bed can be very helpful to startups to test their new technologies in space.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Mr. Fuchs, where do you see positive government support, and where would you say is room for improvement? Modi just mentioned the finance aspect. What is your takeaway?
Of course, space is an industry that is still very much also depending and working together with governments. There are significant institutional programs. So, of course, for us in Germany, of course, the contributions to the European Space Agency ESA are very important in that respect. And at the last ministerial conference, we had a record, that the biggest from all countries, a record commitment from Germany to ESA with a big number of projects. So this is obviously very important for industry, even with all the commercial opportunities and with all the global activities that are going on, and in terms of new initiatives, but also in terms of established commercial activities. But beyond that, there is more and more room where governments are also really customer, where there's a need for services. It's in climate, it's in environment, it's in safety and security, military applications. So governments are a very important sector on the national level, on a European level. And events like this highlight also bilateral cooperation would not be possible without government support. And as Avi said, he just had apparently a conversation with DLR, so there's an agency-to-agency umbrella around all this. And governments will remain very important to help the national industries to increase competitiveness. So space is and will always remain an activity that has those two dimensions, institutional and commercial.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Blasberger, how is funding in the new space area organized in Israel? Do you have any tricks for us?
I hope I would have tricks for you. But of course, funding is coming through different channels. First channel that we're working on is bilateral and multilateral cooperation, which I mentioned previously, and Marco mentioned it as well. This is one channel, but this is not specifically for new space. This is specifically for spaces in general. Mm-hmm. We have in Israel the process of the Innovation Authority, which support startup company. Mm-hmm. And we in the Space Agency, we formed together with the Innovation Authority a specific track for innovation companies dealing with space, mm-hmm. with a little bit better option with the normal Innovation Authority track. Currently, we are considering building infrastructures for basic infrastructure for building satellite, for R&D, and even for engineering for the use of new companies. That since space is, let's say, very multidisciplinary, and not every company has all the disciplines. So in order to save some of the needs in order to raise such a company, we will support with them with some engineering, with some infrastructure that they will be able to concentrate in the main track of their R&D. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you have a trick for me, I'm open to hear.
Yeah. Good. Thank you very much. So looking at the time, I would like to open now the last round of questions before we go into the broader debate and discussion with the audience. And I'm again starting with Frau Christmann. Do you have any ideas how German-Israeli cooperation in space should look like in the future?
Yeah, thank you. for this last question, maybe I could add one to the last debate, one remark that it's not only about funding, but it's also about a legal framework that needs to be there to give especially startups like an idea where what kind of legal framework they have, they can work on, and they can cooperate also on an international level. And we don't have this so far. It was planned for this coalition, but they didn't manage to make a new legal framework for new space. So that is, I think, also an important step that needs to be done in near future. And also this is, I think, important for cooperations with Israel, and to have the possibility to really have the companies, the ecosystem in Germany that is able to build up cooperations with Israel. I think it needs to go on both levels. On a governmental level, you need to have these cooperations, but also on an industrial level, because it's the ecosystem of all these actors that needs to work. And if we support our ecosystem in Germany, we can have good opportunities to also cooperate with Israel. And I think maybe also for Europe, it's very important that we don't look only at the European Union when we think of international cooperations, but that we also really look on cooperations with other countries like Israel, like Great Britain more and more, and also in other areas. Switzerland is an important country in Europe, so it's not only the European Union, but I think in many technological fields, it's also other countries that are very important for international cooperations. So I think it's important to get this further also with Israel.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Moti, what about you? What are your wishes? Would you, for example, like to launch your rocket from a launch pad in the German North Sea? Could that be an option?
Absolutely, and I think maybe it relates to the previous question of having the ability to get access to space for new technologies is a major barrier to every startup in the space domain. So if there's going to be a first launch of a German company, and there are 3 of them that are being promoted now in Germany. So the first launch will probably be very risky. We would be happy to be a part of this launch, put our technology, and see if it works. It's a risk share of both companies, and it can be an excellent opportunity. I can think of several startup companies, both in Israel and in Germany, that would be happy to share the technology in this first launch, and it can be beneficial, to all the space ecosystem. So the answer is definitely yes.
Okay, great. Mr. Fuchs, what can and should German-Israeli cooperation look like from your perspective? Any concrete ideas? Professor Ben Israel mentioned in his keynote that he is in the United Arab Emirates at the moment for a possible joint mission to the moon. Wouldn't that be an option for us in OHB as well?
Yes, very, very well-suited question, because we have since 2.5 years an agreement with the Israeli company IAI on a lunar surface access service. And that's a commercial service proposed by IAI and OHB that offers institutional and private customers first flight opportunity to the lunar surface. And that is very quickly to be done, because it's based on the actual flight heritage that was gained with the Israeli Bereshet mission, which was a big success overall. Obviously, the landing was a harder landing than expected, but I think it's an unbelievable success compared to any other lunar endeavors so far. And IAI has been involved in that and is involved in that with the Israeli lunar lander. So we signed an agreement with IAI, and we're working on it. We signed an MOU with ESA. And the idea is based on the existing technology, which starts with a limited payload, about 25 kilo, but then potentially to increase it in evolution up to 85 kilo, to have a service to Moon, because everybody wants to go to Moon. Europe will develop its own technology to go to Moon, but this will take much longer. So as a preparatory for the scientific community, as a preparation to mitigate risks and to have immediate access, this initiative as a commercial endeavor is a good example of an Israeli-German cooperation. And we hope that we will take the next steps and be able to be part of the return to Moon for Europe and together with Israel.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that this kind of ambitious flagship projects foster broader innovation?
I think space in general fosters innovation in a sense, and obviously the return to Moon in itself, yes. Obviously, many nations are going to Moon, are going to Mars. It's about symbolic, it's about visibility. There needs to be a very, very specific technology, a set of specific technologies. And this is, I think, the massive achievement of Bereshit, that was demonstrated. And it would be a pity not to reuse it many times, because the Moon is a destination that will be visited multiple times, and we should use the existing technologies and the existing innovation that has been made to do more. And eventually also do activities with the own European vehicle will benefit from that. So yes, I think it's an engine for innovation.
Mm-hmm. Is that also something you, as in your function as vice president of the BDLI, are promoting in general for the industry?
We are promoting exploration. Of course, we are promoting as German industry lunar exploration. We hope that the ongoing European lunar exploration program will be funded, further funded for implementation the upcoming ministerial conference. So yes, we believe, we hope that the European model to the Moon will be strongly supported by Germany and by German industry in the implementation.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And Mr. Blasberger, last question. So what can be done from your perspective to bring the startup nation Israel working closer together with, let's say, the industrial powerhouse Germany?
So, in the past, it was, I think, more than 3 years ago, we did a workshop together with German industry, startup Israeli industries and startup German industries. And finally, we find one project which the government from each side funded their side. I think this is a good idea. Maybe we need to elaborate that once more, to do mutual fund to encourage Israeli industry to get know German industry and vice versa. And that in that way, when it starts, then it goes by itself. But okay, you need to ignite that and to initiate that. Otherwise, everybody is concentrating his work and it never works. But if you encourage that, that might be a power multiplier.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to open the floor now to some questions from the audience. We have a few minutes left. Are there already any specific questions? I'm looking into the chat. There is a question to Mr. Fuchs. Does RFA has a plan to go to the Moon?
I mean, the initial plan obviously is first to go to orbit. I think this is a big challenge to start with a rocket, and obviously every rocket carries the idea of an evolution in itself, and if rockets get bigger, they might go further. I know some people at RFA do have that vision, but we're focusing first to successfully fly into orbit.
Okay. Then there's another question. Do you see any possibility to launch German smart satellites from Palmachim? So I guess that's the Israeli launch site, maybe Avi Blasberger.
I don't think so. The Palmachim is not the most effective one. The Palmachim is going to the west, and everybody knows that in order to be effective launch, you need to go to the east or at least to the north. So this launch pad was built for specific purposes. It's not for commercial purposes.
Mm-hmm. Then there's another question to Avi. Do you have specific fields, missions, projects in mind for which you wish a better cooperation between the Israel and German Space Agency?
First of all, currently the flagship project with the German Space Agency is on the Orion that's going to the moon next year. We have there an Israeli radiation protection vest, which is on a German human dummy to measure radiation, the protection of the vest. That it is an ongoing project that will be the first payload going to the moon next year on the unmanned mission. First unmanned Artemis mission. As I said just today, I was speaking with the DLR and looking for a new way, new areas of cooperation. And now I know that Germany is very interested in remote sensing, and Israel is a very strong side of Israel is in remote sensing, so it's a potential area of cooperation. However, we should be open and to hear the people, the industries, and go together with their wishes to the best of the industry and the agency together.
Okay. Thank you. Then there's another question to Marco Fuchs from Peter de Selding from the Space Intel report. Marco Fuchs, you mentioned a possible spaceport in the North Sea, but isn't RFA planning first to use the Norwegian Andøya facility?
Yes, we are launching from Andøya. We start, obviously, to launch in Andøya. Andøya is well underway. This is our first port to launch from. But obviously, if cadence increases, we would be obviously also happy to consider launching from other spaceports. So since the North Sea spaceport is not formally decided, it's not the first priority of RFA at this moment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And then there was one last question. Where does China fit into this international effort from either Germany or Israel? Maybe Frau Christmann, do you want to answer that question? What about China?
Yeah, I'm not an expert about space activities of China. Maybe one other person can add something on that. But I think in general, it's clear that we need really strong cooperations from the German side with other countries to really get on a level that is relevant on the global side. So there we often also in other technologies have the discussion. It's China, it's the US, and it's Europe. And as I said before, I think Europe is more than the European Union, but it's also the cooperation between countries that are part of Europe, that are around Europe, and that are good partners to have a really agile ecosystem of governmental funding, startups, and a strong industry. And I think that is even more important when we look at activities that happen in China in all technology fields. As I said, though, I'm not an expert, especially in the space field.
Okay, so looking at the time, it's 3:15. Carsten, I would say we are on time, perfectly on time. And once again, I would like to thank our 4 panelists for this great and frank exchange. And back to you, Carsten. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matthias.
Thank you very much.
Everyone on the first panel. I think that was already quite an inspiring discussion, and I'm very much looking forward to continue that one-on-one or also here on the next round. Our next panel, however, will build actually on the topic of the first. So coming from the state as a solid rocket booster, fostering innovation, we will now speak about From the Earth to the Moon, a common German-Israeli journey. And it's my pleasure to welcome on stage now some experts from industry, startups, and politics again to discuss this particular question and everything that is related to it. So please welcome with me Shlomo Sudri, Vice President and General Manager from the MBT Space Division at Israel Aerospace Industries. Further, we have Niklas Ninas, member of the European Parliament. There he is a member of the group of the Greens, the European Free Alliance. He's actually a German member of the European Parliament. Also, please welcome Daniel Bock, the CEO and co-founder of Morpheus Space. So speaking about German new space startups, there is one. And please welcome Leo Ehrmann, co-founder and partner of Type 5 Venture Capital. So let's see that we have everyone here on stage. I think we should still have Daniel Bock with us. There we go. All right, so a warm welcome again from my side. It's great to have you here for the next 45 minutes. Like in the first panel, we will first have a round of discussions among ourselves, and then I'm happy to also invite the audience in case there are any questions or comments from our visitors and our spectators. Very well. So let's maybe start with you, Shlomo. Could you please present the Israel Aerospace Space Division and your activities with a particular focus on the moon lander? Because I think that's your field of expertise, isn't it?
Yes. Hello, shalom from Israel. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you our space division activities. IAI is the leading company in Israel for the space program, as the prime contractor for all the satellites and the moon landers. Maybe we'll start with the initiative for the space program in Israel was a peace agreement. After we signed a peace agreement with Egypt, we needed the ability to fly over the Sinai Peninsula without flying over it actually. So we came up with the space program and developed the observation satellite. And currently, 40 years after that, Israel have a capability to develop a variety of observation satellite, both electro-optical and SAR, radar satellite. You can see behind me, Jerusalem from 500 kilometers. I can tell you that from the ground is even better. And this is the first line of business in IAI, the observation satellite. The other one is the communication satellite, the big geo communication satellite. And last but not the least, in the recent years, as mentioned in the beginning, we entered into the moon lander. We started with the Google Prize initiative, and Space IL came with a great idea, commercial idea, not business-wise. And we developed the Bereshit moon lander. You can see it here in a small size. It was a very unique adventure because there are a lot of challenges that are a little different from developing a satellite. And together with Space IL, we managed to develop the project. It cost a little more than planned in the Google Prize, but we managed to do a very fascinating trip to the moon. As all of you know, we didn't do a direct flight to the moon. We did a kind of extending the orbit in order to catch the gravity of the moon, and unfortunately, we land a little faster than expected. But anyhow, we think that we can leverage our heritage our capabilities from the satellite and implement them in the moon lander area. And maybe later in the panel, I will elaborate about our partnership with OHB and other ideas in this area.
Thank you very much. So we already heard early on today Professor Ben Israel saying it wasn't a crash, it was just a hard landing. And I'm sure that many experiences can be derived from that for further missions. Speaking about the risks and challenges that all of us have to face with new endeavors. Daniel, you are the co-founder and CEO of Morpheus Space. So where did the intention actually come from at the beginning to establish a space company, and what's unique about Morpheus?
Yeah, hello and shalom to also our Israeli friends. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on such a panel. What was our intention and what makes us unique? I think so. Unique, I heard that word quite often which was connected to Morpheus Space. And I think what makes us unique is our approach, how we handle things. So and the core value of our company is change, as you can see in our name already. So about morphing, about shaping, changing the shape of something. And we always try to question the status quo. So, and I think the space industry is a good example. It was established, multiple decades ago, but is quite old school still in a lot of things, a lot of manners. And what we are doing, on what kind of field we are focusing on, is the in-space maneuverability. So we are building an ecosystem, a whole one-stop shop for in-space maneuverability. And our first achievement was to develop the world's smallest and most efficient propulsion systems. So I also can show it like Shlomi could. So it's really small. And the basic idea of it is to have modularity on spacecraft, so that you can produce on a much smaller cost and really enable mass production for space subcomponents. But we also concentrate not only on space hardware, but also try to answer questions like automatization of maneuvers and how you can get to a specific orbit or target destination, and how you could automatize that, and also how you figure out what is actually a good orbit for you, and how you could set up your constellations and your missions, as well as changing them over time. So you see also again the changing aspect of Morpheus Space.
Amazing. Thank you very much. I'd like to stay with the two of you for another second. Thomas Jarzombek at the beginning introduced one of the programs ELNET is hosting, the German-Israeli network of startups and Mittelstand. And speaking with an established company and a startup, so we have IAI and we have Morpheus Space. So Shlomo, how is your collaboration with startups going in Israel, but also in Germany? And where do you maybe see potential for more collaboration with the German industry, in particular also with German startups, obviously?
Okay, so I can tell you that we have a very rich experience in building an ecosystem. When we started the space program in Israel, we didn't develop everything here in IAI. We use a lot of startups and small company and other high-tech company in order to implement their solution in our satellite. And I think this is a very good structure to do a joint program with Germany and enable Germany startups and Germany high-tech company to do the design together and to implement their systems in our satellites. Another thing is that we have a very rich experience in international collaboration. We developed with the French the Venus observation satellite for commercial and environmental research. We developed with the Italian satellite, and right now with the Israeli Space Agency and NASA and Weizmann Institute, we developed an observation satellite that will be in the geo belt and look the opposite way, look in the deep space and analyzing supernova phenomena, etc. So I think by our experience in involving startups and small companies and our international cooperation, this is a win-win situation that we can do it, especially with the companies from Germany.
Great. So I think that's a lot of room for new opportunities and new endeavors. In the first panel, we spoke a lot about also the political framework and what politicians can do to foster such collaborations and also to make it easier, in particular for younger companies. And we have an expert here from the political field. It's Niklas Ninas. I introduced him already, member of the European Parliament for the Green Party. So great to have you with us today. And staying with you for a second, earlier on we already touched the point that the European Union is currently debating for the Horizon Europe program if Israel and other countries should or should not be included in the space section of this research grant. So how do you rate the current developments and also changes to rather foster more collaboration in research and actual projects instead of reducing that number?
Yeah, well, let me, first of all, hello and shalom to everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me. But let me introduce a little bit into the idea behind that, that is called strategic autonomy, which is the idea of that in certain places, it cannot work that the European Union or any members or any state can work with others together if it's very fragile information technology. One example can be, for example, Britain. Since they sadly left the European Union, they were the one who were actually encoding the frequencies in the communication between satellites, I believe of Galileo. And there was, of course, a very critical infrastructure, because if you know the coding for the communication, you can do all shenanigans in theory, and you don't want external member states to have the control over this very specific field. And I think for that it makes sense. And for that point, me personally, I was catched by the idea of strategic autonomy. But that means that it's only viable in a very narrow sense, right? It makes sense where it's very critical infrastructure, but not in a broad sense that the Commission has proposed so far. Because what we've seen so far from the Commission's proposal was to exclude third countries like Israel, Switzerland, and Great Britain in the same way as they would exclude Russia and China, for example. And I think there is a very distinctive difference between China, Russia, and Switzerland and Israel on the other hand. And so I think their proposal was to exclude from quantum mechanics as well as all these space endeavors, the third countries. And I think that is plainly wrong. We can talk about specific fields, like maybe coding for communications, or maybe other very specific issues, where an exclusion would make sense in a strategic sense. But overall, we have to understand that only in cooperation we can grow together. And it doesn't make any sense in a ever-changing field that is changing and moving so quickly as the space research is going on at the moment, as the new space endeavors are going on, to then hinder ourselves and stop ourselves from moving as quickly as possible by putting restrictions of with whom we can work together and with whom not. It is clear that we have differences between several states in the world, that with some we have very good relations and with others maybe not so good. But with those with whom we have good relations, we should work together and not to exclude them from research. So I'm very hopeful, and I think that we, as well as in Germany, as with the German Bundestag and the German Bundesregierung, we have made it clear, but also we have made it clear in the European Parliament, in the negotiations that have been put so far, that we do not want to see this extensive strategic autonomy, as Mr. Breton calls it, that we don't want to see that being put forth.
Well, thank you also for your efforts of really like doing what's possible as a member of parliament to keep Israel as part of the Horizon Europe program, also in space. And I think quantum computing is the other topic that is to be discussed. Lior, you are in the venture capital business, and I mean, speaking about hard landings of new projects on the one hand, and sometimes difficult political situations where it's unclear if investments from the governmental side will remain as they used to be. What made you actually deciding to focus your investment priorities in the risky area of new space?
Well, first of all, thank you and a pleasure to be here. I decided to enter this field after 2 years of intensive research on the recent government reformation that are taking place worldwide, starting from Washington and reports that most of us are aware of. And taking everything that happens in account from the government perspective and connecting it to the industry that I'm coming from, which is the high tech, it's very clear that in the past 70 years, the private sector became very efficient, very educated, and very technological, and can contribute a lot to the infrastructure foundations that were developed by the governments. And having successful world-class entrepreneurs like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk that everyone brings up their name, and when you start talking about aerospace, having them succeeding in what they were ambitiously trying to do 15 years ago and making those efforts a fact today, a known fact worldwide, I think that we are finally after 70 years of cartoons and pop culture and human exploration, in a point where the industry of the people of Earth can start sync with what the government has been working on for so long in their doing. And that's pretty much what got me curious and involved in the new aerospace and space tech sector. And second thing also that happened in Israel, as everyone mentioning, is the Space IL project that created the Apollo effect in Israel. And one of our senior board members is actually Einat Berkovich, who was the CEO of Morris Kahn Foundation, who discovered Bereshit. And when she heard about the idea to start a venture capital that will focus on aerospace and will turn this great success of small team to get into the moon and turn it into a full-blown space tech ecosystem, it came wide clear that we were presenting a solution that will connect the government, private sector, and the momentum of the market in real time, and will help to accelerate everything into feasible technologies and companies, basically.
Very well, thank you. So staying with your last comment for a second, and again, if I may, looking at Shlomo and Daniel, so also at the industry participants here, what could and should, next to private investments from VCs like Lior and others, what should and could, from your point of view, the government do to assist some advancement in these areas? Looking as well as at the German and the Israeli government, of course.
Maybe I'll start with the Israeli government or the board of the government. I think the best way for me to answer this question is to opposite it. What I can, or the space industry, is contributing to the government to enable them motivation to invest in this area. So I think if I analyze it, maybe 2 or 3 things the space industry is bringing to the government. I think one thing, and all the partners here talked about it, is innovation driver. The space industry is an innovation driver. A lot of technology and technology solutions in the satellites and in the lunar landers are derived from innovation. And I think that this is a very, very rapid driver for innovation. The second thing is that the space industry is a STEM, education engine. STEM, scientific, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I think that young people are fascinating from the space industry. I think every boy wants to be a rocket science or a space science. And I think maybe a couple of years ago, they didn't think about money, but if you now look at the future, most of the rich people in the world are dealing with space. So I think that the space industry is a very rapid driver for STEM education. And last but not the least is an economic driver. A lot of ecosystem was created thanks to the big space industry. A lot of startup like New Rocket that was presented before. And I think that all the above create a lot of motivation to our government to invest R&D in the space industry, to do space agency collaboration like Avi Blasberger mentioned before, to do joint research. I can tell you that we, in the Venus satellite, which is a commercial satellite with a multispectral payload, we do a lot of joint research with academics and investigating environmental phenomena and understanding a lot of interesting things that will help the environment. So I think this is a very good drivers that give the government motivation to invest in our area.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Shlomi on a lot of things, on especially everything connected with innovation and innovation driver. And I would like to extend it a little bit more. So good cooperation is always based on a win-win situation, and especially for public-private partnerships, the public sector should also benefit from whatever the private sector is delivering. So what I see, at least in Germany, I cannot speak of Israel, is a lack of communication, a lack of information. So, for example, German startups don't know what the public needs are, and the public domains don't know what is technically possible and what kind of capabilities startups have. So I think the first step to change that and make it better is to have instruments where there is an exchange between the public and the private sector. If I look, for example, to the US, they established a lot of programs like the SBIR programs, where the government is seeking for ideas and capabilities, and then try to implement that in the needs of the government. And I think this is still missing in Germany. And the next questions then will be how to execute that and how you basically legally do the cooperation. But I think these would be the first steps to tackle this problem. I think and this is not only connected to the space industry. I think Germany could benefit from a lot of different sectors like medical, administration, and so on. I think there are so many startups out there who could help the private hand in a lot of matters.
I couldn't agree more. And I see that Niklas Ninas is typing and doing some notes, and also his colleague from the Bundestag, Dr. Anna Christmann, beforehand said we need more flexible funding structures, but we also need more flexibility when regarding legal frameworks and collaboration between startups and governmental agencies. And recently I had a chat with a friend who and it was about weather forecast. And I mean, when we speak about space, obviously, as Shlomo said earlier on, we can think about exploring deep space and looking like outside Earth, but also having the next generation of satellites monitoring Earth. It might also give us some heads up for a better future regarding more ecological innovation, maybe better weather forecast to start with, but next to that also many other opportunities when it comes to a cleaner and more sustainable economy. So, Niklas, where do you see the opportunities here? What can the European Parliament or maybe also national parliaments do? What's already on the go in order to develop the next round of innovation in that field?
Yeah, thank you very much. Very, very good question, and I want to combine that a little bit with what Shlomi said concerning what can the private endeavors, what can it do for the public? And I think at the moment we already see quite a lot of innovation, and we see quite a lot of areas where we can actually use all the resources that we have. Because if we're not talking about deep space exploration and like all the upstream industry, but if we're talking about the downstream industry, I think that we still have so much potential there, where I want to see more, especially European, but also Israeli and more companies getting up to show what they can do with all the resources we have. As you know, we are streaming 15 terabytes data every day down to Earth from all the satellites that we have. And the majority of this information, the majority of these resources, and some may even say the oil of the information time are these data. The majority of that has been taken up by the big American companies and not by small-scale European or Israeli companies. Even though it is free for all, everybody can take this information, can take this data and use it for their companies. So please do that, and I think we need to find ways for the governments to actually encourage new startups to use them. But I have my doubts. I know how it goes, because I know that a lot of people in the government also don't even know that this data exists. So we mustn't make the mistake there. But what I would think would be very helpful, for example, could be to have a special budget that is always used whenever you have a very plain and easy problem. May it be the weather, may it be, every city now and then has to count their trees or has to ensure how the road is going and so on. It's very easy things that you can do with space services that we have. If you take a look at the picture behind Shlomi, of Jerusalem, you can then use an AI to count maybe the number of cars or maybe the trees. That is information that most regions and municipalities need, that the government needs, and all this information could be given by companies. And if we have a special budget to really give contracts in this way and to pay a little bit more rather than taking it from Google and Microsoft and so on, but ensure that our own companies have the possibility to thrive, I think then we on the one hand can better the community of startups, but on the other hand also can show the public what space actually does for us. To bring it more into the perspective of the people would really help to increase the spending from the government side. And I'm always having these talks, especially I'm from the Greens, so from an ecological party, and I'm trying to tell them also, why do we need space exploration? Why do we need to support new space? Why does it make sense? And the best example is climate change. We're all hopeful to fight climate change. We need the best information for that, and we can only get it from outer space. And so we need to improve all the information technology that we have, that we need to ensure that all the startups are actually have the possibilities to use the data and to make it as practical as possible. And I hope that we can help each other out. We can throw the balls over, give some additional contracts, some additional funding, and then on the other hand, we can also show what is possible actually with all the data and information that we already have right now, and then we can, really go to the moon.
Thank you. Lior, maybe you could add some thoughts here. I mean,
Sure.
Obviously, we don't even have to go to the moon first in order to come up with innovation to change our planet. But the idea is obviously to go beyond and to really reach out to the moon. So where do you see the opportunity and in particular for collaboration between Germany and Israel here? And what is necessary from the public point of view on the one hand, but also then possible to add from the private sector, from VCs like yours?
So great question. Do you see all my screen?
Yes.
We as a Type 5 creating a few initiatives to make all the great declaration that we all have in our minds practical business-wise. One of the major ones is space cities. I'm sure that you're all familiar with the concept of sister cities, that cities around the world are teaming up with other municipal cities in different countries to collaborate on culture, events, and some, educational activities. We are creating the same concept for space, meaning create a collaboration among the leading cities of the world that are nurturing space innovation hubs and space accelerators and space activities in order to make those collaboration more effective, more transparent, and more fruitful for each other. And we believe that the effort of space is not a nation or a national effort, it's a global effort. The name of our fund itself, Type 5, is taken from the Kardashev scale that talks about the growth of civilizations. And if we're looking at space and what we are all doing here, we're doing something in planetary scale. So I think that Space Cities is an initiative that if the governments of the world and cities and politicians will be involved in initiatives like that, like Space Cities, we will be able to get more funding, more transparency, and more collaboration between Israel and Germany, Germany and Australia, US and Japan, and so forth and so on. And I think we have to start looking at practicality plans, action items, and start working together on leading consortiums of projects together. That's what I think.
Very well. Okay. But where do you see, building on that, the opportunity for more collaboration between Germany and Israel? And is there anything maybe you're already supporting with your VC, or could you even imagine? I mean, we have Daniel Bock here as an entrepreneur from Germany. Could you also imagine to invest into German new space?
Definitely. We're, first of all, next week I will be in Zurich, in Switzerland, for example, and we do have a lot of backing and work in Europe. So definitely I see collaboration. I think that when I look at the German market, vast experience in industrialism, there is a lot of experience in materials and hard manufacturing. And when you look into the Israeli market, there's a lot of experience with innovation and technology. And I think that for the aerospace industry, one of the key accelerators is new materials, or what is known to be called as meta materials. And I think that if Israel and Germany will establish a consortium, for example, for meta materials research in the area of innovative, aerospace material for reinforcement, construction, medicine, communication, and even quantum, we can create together the next generation of products together. So I think that meta materials is one of the key areas where Germany and Israel can do wonders together.
All right, thank you. I see Daniel Bock nodding.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think there are a lot of different technical disciplines where we can cooperate between Germany and Israel on a more high level, on a mission level. I would say that we also should tackle, and maybe we could be the forerunner in the whole industry in Germany and Israel to tackle the sustainability problem in the space domain. So I think everyone is aware of that, but we shouldn't neglect that. This is would be on the same scale as the climate change, which was already named, but it will impact maybe more people and on a larger time frame. So if we don't take care of the space debris problem, and even if we bring it further to other celestial bodies like the moon or the Mars, we will limit our expansion of the humanity. And we can screw our plans of colonizing our solar system if we don't face also the problems of space sustainability. And so I think there's a huge potential. Nobody really cares so much. A lot of people are talking a lot, but I think this could be a great opportunity to join forces on such an important topic.
Thank you.
Your permission.
Yes, Shlomo, go ahead.
I think maybe to sum up these three points and put a practical offer. I think a very good approach to collaboration between Israel and Germany, an environment on one side and small startup on the other side, maybe an idea of building together a research satellite with let's say, a hyperspectral payload that can enable put technology from Israel and for Germany and implementing the satellite. And in the end of the day, this satellite, as Nicola says, enable us to get teras of data with a different wavelength and investigating a lot of environmental phenomena and enable a lot of academics in Israel and in Germany to investigate those data and come up with, I think, very unique findings and outcomes.
Sounds absolutely good to me. I see also Niklas Nina's nodding. This is something for sure. After September, he might want to pick up together with his colleagues. Yeah, I mean, the idea is, how could we improve collaboration on the way to the moon? And I think having a research satellite in orbit is probably an amazing first step. And but maybe you could comment, Shlomo, for a second also on your next moon mission. And so what are potentials for collaboration with German partners? We had OHB on the first panel, so maybe you want to comment on that for the remaining time. By the way, if there are any comments or questions also from the audience, please put them in the chat, in the Q&A, and we can pick them up. Shlomo.
So after accomplishing the Bereshit mission, we thought that we need to accomplish two things. First, to do it again and success. And second, to take the heritage and the experience that we gain in this Bereshit mission and implement it in an international cooperation. So on one hand, we started about half a year ago with Space.il, the new campaign from Bereshit 2. And Space.il came with a very innovative idea to land twice, to develop an orbiter that will carry two landers, and the two landers will land in different places on the moon, and the orbiter will keep on orbiting the moon and do some education and scientific research along the years. So we initiate the very first phase of designing this solution along with Space.il. So this is on one end. On the other hand, we seek for international cooperation in implement the Bereshit concept in NASA initiative and in ESA initiative. And we signed about 2 years ago an agreement with OHB to develop the LSAS, the Lunar Surface Access Service. And the divide of the work, the scope of work between OHB and IAI is that OHB will be the prime contractor, will be the mission leader, and of course the payload choice leader. IAI will develop the lander and will do the integration of the platform with the launcher and with all the payloads. And along those 2 years, in the first year, we did the payload developer seminar with all the payload suppliers to educate them about the interfaces and advance the design in both sides. And recently, we did an ESA pilot phase with OHB to establish the commercial partnership, technical and business-wise. And as Marcus mentioned before, we started with a small bite, LSAS number 1, that aimed to 2024 if ESA will initiate it, and in the future to do a bigger lander with bigger payloads. So this is our vision in this area of Moonlander. We hope that we can succeed with OHB to give the solution to ESA. And on the other hand, we're trying to do also some adventures with NASA on the other hand.
Great, thank you very much. Niklas, I saw your hand, but also in looking at the time to round it up, I have several questions on the chat, and I'd like to give the panel the opportunity to pick them up maybe in the closing remarks. So let's have a look. there is at least two questions that are related to European politics. So good for you, Niklas, here. So Daniel Klisch is asking, how is the European strategic autonomy topic connected to EDA's strategic research agenda? So maybe you want to pick up on that. And another question related to that is also if the European Parliament on the Air or Space Committee, if they formulated an opinion in writing about third countries like Israel and Horizon Europe, that lines what you proposed. This question is from Peter B. Deselding. And maybe you want to pick up on these two questions in your remarks.
Just briefly. So the current status of that is that there was the proposal from the Commission to exclude several member states or several third states for strategic autonomy, as you're all very well aware of. But this was from the House of Breton. We don't know if was him personally, but French are maybe in this regard have a clear stance on this. But it has not been, further. It has been discussed, but it wasn't officially proposed. It was like a non-paper, and we are waiting to see what's coming out of this. But the stance of the Parliament is, at least as I'm hearing the discussion so far with colleagues on this, is quite clear. The stance of other member states, as I mentioned, for example, Germany, is quite clear that this is not exactly the idea of research coexistence and research cooperation that we envision for the European Union, that this is rather a very French way of doing this, let's put it this way. Whereas we also don't know whether it is it could be, and that's for the research EDA, it could be also a strategic approach. We don't quite know, there have been tendencies with Britain, with Switzerland, on very different issues, as well as for Israel. So there are different reasons why one could table something like that, let's put it this way, and we will see how it works. But what's very clear is, at least for the Greens, but also in Germany, but also in the European Parliament, is that we do not agree with the approach so far, and I think that we can convince the Parliament on that as well. For the future of cooperation, though, I think it is important that we work together, not just in research, but also in, of course, new space approaches, because when we look at the players that we have internationally, Germany is very tiny, Israel is very, very tiny in regards to other players, and I think if we want to have a possibility of competition, if we want to have possibility to have a word with it, we should work together. I'm very much welcoming Israel, especially, to join the ESA at a certain point. I think that would be also very wonderful to work better together. And I think that it is crucial that we also work on a new international legislation for that, because we see differences to where we stood 50 years ago with the Outer Space Treaty, and I think especially for new space, it would be important to have clearer rules, what is allowed also with the sustainability of space, what is allowed with resources, mining, etc., and what is not allowed. And it cannot be that only the first comes serves first, and that some rich Americans take everything up in space. And I think it would make sense that we all stand together there with the smaller countries, and that Israel and Germany, as well as the European Union, formulates a very strong interest in that the space itself is a common heritage of humankind, and not of some very rich entrepreneurs, and solemnly with them. So that would be very welcoming to work on different occasions together, and I think it's very important for Israel and Germany.
Very inspiring closing remarks for this panel. Thank you very much, Niklas. There are plenty of more questions in the chat, for example, and this could probably fill another hour, about the idea of investing into R&D on nuclear propulsions. This could probably be quite controversial. So I suggest, looking at the time, we'll leave that for the next round. So hopefully, and I'm sure this won't be the last German-Israeli Space Forum. We have touched on so many topics, from the Earth to the Moon was the second panel of our today's Space Forum. I think a big focus needs to be still on, and Niklas Ninas touched it at the end in his closing remarks, also on including Israel in the Horizon Europe program when it comes to research in space, because that is what's needed for the next generation of entrepreneurs on the one hand, for our society overall, and also for those companies that are already very well established and in the industry for quite a while. So thank you again, Shlomi, Niklas, Daniel, and Lior for being with us here on this second panel. And with having said that, I'd like to hand it over to Matthias from the German Industry Association, from the BDI, to close up this very last round. Matthias.
Thank you very much, Carsten, and thank you very much to everybody for participating, for discussing, for bringing up ideas, and just for participating. I think we've seen a great spirit today, a lot of ideas about what we could do and what we should do. And the bottom line, I would say, is that there is a clear signal and a great message here from this forum that we should aim for more German-Israeli cooperation in space. The moon was mentioned very often as a joint endeavor. I think that would be a fascinating idea. It would excite people in Israel, in Germany. It would foster innovation, and it would bring our two countries even further together. I think that would be a great idea. And with that being said, I now would like to officially close this first German-Israeli Space Forum. It will definitely be not the last one. I think there is a lot of interest and potential, and maybe next time we have the opportunity to see each other face to face. And last but not least, I would also like to thank Carsten and his team of ELNET for doing this thing together today. And I wish our friends and partners in Israel all the best. Looking forward to see you next time. Stay healthy, curious, and safe. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank. Toda rabba.